Music. Open. You want to go off camera? I can.
Thanks.
I'm gonna unpin you until we start, by the way, or unspotlight you. All right. Ready? You're muted. Yeah.
Ready.
Cool. Good morning. If you're on the West Coast, welcome to Evolution Leadership Foundations. My name is Stephanie, and I am the head of community here at Evolution. We are going to just take a couple of minutes and allow people to arrive. So, if you're seated, find a comfy place. If you're walking around, just, get into the groove a little bit, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes here. If you're just joining, welcome to Evolution Leadership Foundations. My name is Stephanie, and I'm the head of community here at Evolution. We are going to just give it a couple of minutes and allow some more people to arrive, and we'll get started soon. And welcome if you're just joining. Go ahead and get settled. We'll get started with Evolution Leadership Foundations in about a minute here. So excited to have you all join us. Happy Friday and welcome to Evolution Leadership Foundations. My name is Stephanie and I'm the head of community here at Evolution. And it looks like we are ready to get started. So I'm going to hand this off to Matt.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good summer wherever you are. Janet is unfortunately unable to be with us today, so I have been talking with her in my head all week. She's been on vacation. I'd prefer to talk to her live, but she is here in this, and we had a good discussion around this topic today, which is around presence and really thinking about leadership and executive presence, something that is in many ways one of those things that we know it when we see it and hard to define. So we'll all have to imagine Janet's here, and hopefully we have just a really good conversation either way. Those of you that have joined us, you'll remember this is somewhat a podcast style talk. We'll have opportunities for you to reflect. I'm going to do some meditations that really ground and integrate some of the concepts. If you can give yourself the gift for this hour, would really encourage you to just be present yourself and use this as an opportunity to reflect. If you would like, there will be some slides and visuals, but again, this can be completely auditory if you prefer that too. All right, so let's just do a quick settling as we've done, just as a way to context switch wherever we have been coming from and just allowing ourselves to really kind of arrive here. So why don't you find that posture of nobility, imagining yourself as a dignified, regal person as you are. And if you'd like, your eyes shutting and just giving yourself this small gift of dropping in, as we say. So shutting your mouth, maybe breathing through your nose and using your breath to draw yourself both inside in awareness and at the same time projecting your field outside of yourself and becoming aware of your surroundings, not needing to do anything or worrying if your mind is drifting, and allowing yourself just to arrive in your body, in the room that you're in this hour, noticing subtle energies maybe inside of you, noticing energy outside of you, using your senses to touch the temperature of the air, ambient noise, maybe in the room or the next room, not needing to do anything as a human being, not a human doing, as we say. Sometimes I just can feel myself drifting down into my body when this happens, like the snow in a snow globe or motes of light in a sunbeam, just drawing my awareness in a pleasant gravitational sense, sinking down maybe deeper into my sit bones, feeling my feet on the floor. Take a nice, easy breath in and welcome. All right. So why don't we, based on that, we have been checking in. So if you are here and you are willing, give a line of how you're arriving this morning, just to clip in both to yourself and whatever version of container that we're building here for this hour, and put that in chat right now. Chat is disabled, Jim says.
Oh,
all right.
Hold on.
Thanks. Encourage you as we're going through this as well to put questions in there. I'll pop on and off slides as we go through, and there'll be opportunity to kind of do questions. So it can be interactive in that sense, please. And certainly right now you can put it in, I think, the Q&A button as well. Should be on now. All right. So what's a line of how you're arriving this morning? What are you present to as you're switching into the space this 45 minutes we'll spend together? Welcome. Yeah, whatever you're bringing is completely welcome. Checking in, I think, is both a tool to relate to another person, and it is also an opportunity to just check in with ourselves, given how fast most of us run. So really encourage you to do this throughout the day, but it's certainly good at the beginning, and I think the end as well. Welcome, everybody. All right, so here we go. We are going to talk about presence. if you remember the journey that we've been on building this content at Evolution, Foundations really was this dialogue that says we actually have a point of view, and many of the time we're working in client systems and matching their DNA and supporting them in their role. But there are some leadership concepts that we think are distinctive that allow for a little deeper cut in this discussion about leadership development, which is really about human development, about who we are in this world and what we're creating and how we work with others in common cause to do that. And knowing that when we're on a leadership journey, manifesting and creating something with other people, there's incredible depth. And to become a leader means to become more of ourselves. And the journey of leadership is a journey into the depths of ourselves. It's where most of us practice and grow and experiment in our human operating system every day, given most of our waking time is spent at work. So when we talk about leadership and executive presence, and you think about this narrative really building deliberately, where it's really a roll-up, a lot of what's come before in terms of being self-aware of the parts of ourselves, in terms of being able to be present in the moment, in our bodies, to understanding the different parts of ourselves, maybe that are nice to look at, understanding that there are developmental levels. We can move from egocentricity to world centricity, and it takes a lot in that ladder. There's initiations that happen where we change and grow and feel pain and learn. And as we move up as a human in our own development, we reach higher levels of awareness and consciousness and being. And then all of our foundations, looking at the world holistically, I, we at Be Do Have, using integral theory, including everything, different lines of development that we can use to grow ourselves. You can already feel in this complexity all of those elements of lenses, if you will, looking at how people grow, are ways to just understand ourselves and build ourselves out. And as we do that, and as we become more complex, something in us develops that is compelling. And so in the study of leadership presence, I think of various people that I have met. And I'm actually very into this topic in the sense that when I was a younger man, I participated in men's groups. And I remember going to a graduation after one of the weekends, and there's people talking, and they allowed us to talk, and family and friends came. It was one of those things that happen kind of after workshops. Many of you have been to those. And this guy stands up, and his name was Snake Bloomstrand. And a lot of people in this men's organization used there's animal names as metaphors for growth and as a way to kind of metaphorize the stretch that you're going for. And it's used as kind of a more metaphorical way of being tool than a kind of a literal thing. But this guy kind of adopted it somehow, and everybody called him Snake. It wasn't his real name. And he stood up, and I remember being absolutely transfixed when he was talking. And it was like there was an energy field radiating off of him. And Snake's role in the Mankind Project at the time was international. And he told the story of going to South Africa and putting up a flyer about what masculinity was in the modern age in South Africa, and having kind of a free seminar and discussion. And apparently 100 people arrived to the church that he had posted about, and he facilitated that discussion and created a network of men exploring consciousness and masculinity in South Africa, including healing in the townships and doing deep work. And as he told this story, I remember it was not only the content of his story, but it was his voice. He had an energy to him. There was a subtlety of how he put himself together. He had that same bangle, that bracelet on his arm. I remember noticing that. And I looked at him and I said, I don't know what he has. I don't know, there's some intangible thing about him. And this is me as like a 21-year-old man. And I said, whatever he has, I want that. And so that started an odyssey to discover what this kind of magic is that certain people have and certain people don't, and why some people are charismatic, and why when certain people speak, people listen, and when certain people speak, they don't listen, and how certain people can walk into a room and change the energy. And so I spent a lot of time with Snake and others in this discussion and exploration around what is presence and what gives people this deep sense of gravity or gravitas. That word, which is Latin and relates to that sense of like deepening. And you think of somebody, think of people in your own life that have that, and the effect that it has on you. And for me, when I listen to him, or I think about the other people in my life that I look at and admire for their presence and gravitas, there is like a quality of depth that comes off of them and actually impacts me. And I feel myself slowing down and deepening and leaning in. And so I'm curious, just maybe put this in chat. Who are some people that you can think of, maybe in your life, or maybe people that are public figures that have a sense of presence or gravitas? A few examples. Yeah, Brene Brown, sure. Ram Dass back in the day. Important when you watch Brene speak, or when you watch Ram Dass speak, it's as much about how they speak and what they're emanating. Thank you, Jamie. As it is the content of what they're saying. Yeah, Oprah, Salonis, absolutely has presence. Yeah. And these different people that I think we can, admire, as we say, if you spot it, you got it. And there's clues there that I think that we're going to deconstruct a little bit in our talk, and maybe provide some pathways for us to deepen it in ourselves. Nelson Mandela, absolutely. He's an excellent example. We'll maybe talk a little bit more about him. So when we talk about what presence is, it's subtle and it's pervasive. If you go, I was like, what's out there? And if you Google executive presence, a lot of what you get is like giving appropriate feedback and having high IQ or EQ, and understanding and being a good leader. And it's like, it doesn't really cut the subtlety of what it is. And then if you go and you read Richard Strozzi Heckler's books, you understand that it has to do with the body, right? And the body language of presence. And if you read Peter Senge and et al.'s book about presence, you understand it's about this like deepening and this awareness that arises when we deepen. And it's just one of those things where people call it out. And in this inquiry, as we kind of prepared for this, we really started to kind of unpack all of the different elements of it, and organize to put it in a linear form. And in a moment, I think we actually, there is a 5-step a path that we can look to describe this. But before we go there, all of these different points of light, we think about EQ, my social sensitivity, my level of awareness of myself and how I use that in social situations. Think of authenticity. So if you think about Brene Brown speaking at a level of depth and vulnerability that activates the limbic core and other people, our social neurons fire when vulnerability happens and we relate. It's like, wow, that's compelling when somebody's very authentic. Confidence, the confidence that's exuded, the integrated, humble confidence that a person has, not boastfulness or over the top energy. Their look, that's something that like, wow, are you really saying that, evolution? And it's true. It doesn't mean that you need to, the classic kind of bastardized form is wearing a suit or whatever, but your look and how you present yourself is an external representation of your internal essence. And it doesn't mean that you need to wear expensive clothes or dress up, but how you care for yourself and how that presents is also a part of your presence. So we want to include that as well. How much energy you have, domain competence. So having credibility in which is related in what you do. You know what you're talking about. In credibility, you do what you say you're going to do. There's a sense of integrity that shows up. Your affect and tone, the tone of voice, how you speak, the phrasing of how you speak, your body language and how that shows up, over nodding, looking away, hunched shoulders, all of those things. And then just your aura and whatever that is. And then there's this other piece that shows up, which is around your psychic, emotional, and spiritual integration. And the more integrated you are, we would postulate the more presence you have. People with presence have this deeply integrated psyche and spiritual core that just radiates out of them and probably has to do with their aura. So all of these things relate when we think about a leader's presence. And so in that, embedded in that, are some things that that are also, that are not explicitly called out, like purpose and values, and those things that we traditionally think when we talk about or teach leadership, but it goes beyond having a purpose and values. That's also very important. Yeah. So tone is my biggest challenge. Yeah, if you think of a lot of therapeutic work that was done, especially kind of in the early days, working with people, it's trying to match their tone and affect. It's like kind of why it's creepy when you say something that's unsettling and you're smiling, or why people actually think, believe it or not, mannequins are creepy. It's because we're, as a social species, we're always patterning off of that other person and connecting to their affect and tone. And instead of it being manufactured, it's really good to have it be authentic. But there's some natural things. And at the very end, we're actually going to start unpacking executive presence in a very light dip from a former senior leader at a company I worked at, and just give a very tactical cut of how it shows up in a meeting. But before that, we are evolution, and we're going to go cosmic, of course. Yes. Jim, you know that conversation well, right? Matching affect and tone leverages change. Absolutely. The other thing that shows up is in a leader that develops presence, there is a sense of span, like a breadth of knowledge and expertise. They've done the work to know what they're talking about and have integrated that. And then there is a sense of depth. So they have gone into the vertical levels of development. If you remember, we talked about this, where they've integrated different parts of themselves, where they've mined deep learnings both down, and then they've gone up into the transcendence, purpose, vision, connecting to higher power, a sense of spiritual energy that they're able to use to engage themselves and others. And so when we work both the vertical and horizontal lines of development and leadership, and we actively coach people on both of these in any given coaching session where we're working either axis, presence is developed. Yeah. And then there's the great intangible. And this is beyond all of those different elements, those different points of light. There is just that element of how maybe it all mingles together, maybe something mysterious and transpersonal, maybe something karmic. And it's okay to talk about that too, because when we think about presence, it does go to the deepest parts of ourselves and our awareness of ourselves in the universe, actually. So here it is. All of those points of light constellating this loosely looks at the different energy levels for those of you that have read Wilbur and kind of understand subtle and causal and gross, the different kind of energies. When we think about how do you develop presence, there are kind of 5 dimensions that we can use to build this. And just as a heads up, the vocational one, we're not going to talk about very much here. That is, again, your credibility, your domain expertise, taking courses in what you do, knowing what you're talking about, having credibility, building mastery over time, understanding that that's a big part of presence as it shows up in leadership, but it is certainly not the only thing. And that is something that a lot of other people talk about. that is not necessarily the other things here are not necessarily what other people talk about. So let's dive in. All right. So we're going to drop in again. So every time I hear that, it's kind of like a mnemonic, by the way. When you hear Matt say drop in, it's just like you can feel the wave building, and we're about to kind of like, ride it into ourselves and write it in a meditation. So what I'd like you to do is find that posture of nobility, that beautiful metaphor for what meditation is. You think of noble people, again, rarely slumped and rarely rigid, right? There's a stateliness to that. And our body actually changes. Maybe our shoulders move back, our feet are on the ground. We can feel our dignity, our spine is straight. I actually would encourage you to shut your eyes here. If you're willing. If that's too intense, you can leave them open, feeling a lengthening in your spine. You can always stand up if you would like to do that, if you've been sitting. Putting your hands on your knees, tongue against the upper roof of your mouth, chin tucked in slightly, and just allowing yourself to come back to your breathing. You'll find that when we do this a second time, you're able to move quicker into a place maybe of a little bit more stillness, of pervasive connectivity, feeling the hum of the room around you and inside of you. And start your awareness in the room. Again, projecting out, using your 5 senses to feel the temperature of the air and hear the noise. Sometimes you can actually feel your awareness as this expansive bubble. And as you breathe, begin to bring that awareness field. Maybe that's sometimes it's like a fog, or sometimes it's like a bubble. You're able to actually sense your awareness and drawing it in deep into your body. As it slowly moves into your body, you're tracking, you're breathing, thoughts arise, you're letting them pass, keeping your objective focus on this energy field, this subtle awareness, and bringing it into your deep core. Wherever that is for you, it may be your heart, it may be your hara or your dantian, moving somewhere in your core and allowing your awareness to rest there in your body. That field becoming kind of a dense ball and enlivening and awakening you. And feeling this body, understanding that the iron that flows, the iron in the blood that flows in your veins came from stars exploding, came from the Big Bang itself. Understanding that there is energy cannot be created or destroyed in this universe. It simply changes form over and over and over. And that in these cells, as you're pulling in your awareness in your deep core, is the stuff of stars. And as you still and become quiet, going beyond your body into that vast field of silence, that witness consciousness that is always there. That whatever you are aware of, you are not. Your thoughts, you are not. Your body, you are not. Aware of this form that is your body right now, that has arisen in this lifetime. So you touch this deep field that is awake and benevolent. Your awareness explodes into the cosmos. And in this moment, you realize that it has always been and always will be. this deep witness consciousness is the universe itself. It is awake. It is humming with an energy that is always there. You may find yourself traveling, you may feel space itself, you may feel blank. And from this place of all is here and all will always be here, all is well. Feeling a radical awareness that goes beyond your body and your thoughts into the depths of the universe itself. That nothing can be created or destroyed. Everything is, and all is well. And deep in this silence is an awareness of what is. As you're able to hold in this benevolence stars and planets and rocks and matter and life itself in an endless cycle of birth and death, change, that you're able to witness it all and hold it with that sense of benevolent equanimity. Taking a deep breath in and drawing your awareness back in from the cosmos, back into your heart, and taking a breath, anchoring there. Feeling the room around you, wiggling your toes and your fingers. Big breath and eyes opening. The deepest form of presence goes beyond our bodies. It goes beyond our thoughts. If you've been on a deep retreat and you've had an opportunity to see beyond the veil of what actually is, that's the deepest form of presence. Beyond our neuroses, beyond how we look, we're able to understand that there is this thing that we can kind of connect to, that most of the teachers and mystics and sages speak to, that when they access, what arises and presents in their body and how they show up is this eminence and wisdom, and it comes from realization and practice. And once we get a glimpse of the infinite and the divine, it's almost like our body, like in this kind of moment of fire, transforms and we can't go back. And there is some part of us that is forever changed and shows up from that deep place of awareness of the witness consciousness of the nature of life in the universe, of God, as you call it. And from that place, we source our deepest forms of presence. Now, we also know that there's a lot of spiritual teachers who touch that place of depth of the cosmos. And then as a leader of a sangha or a spiritual community, have a transgression with somebody from the community, embezzle money, show up in ways where their anger is displaced. There's a lot of examples of those spiritual teachers. And so we know that doing the work, we can avoid the work of our psyche. And when we think about people that have developed themselves and have gone through their own fire and have become more psychically integrated, that too develops presence. So we think about, again, born whole as an ego, and then parts of ourselves split off. And as that happens, we become more fractured and scattered. And when we provide ourselves that form of containment and we rebuild and reintegrate those parts of our lives back into a sense of wholeness, what develops is that felt sense of centeredness and presence and integration that people look at and they say, wow, there's a sense of calmness about you, or a quiet sense of power, or a quiet sense of confidence. And to me, confidence is that quiet sense of confidence only comes from going into the dark places and answering the big questions of our lives and moving from becoming spiritually integrated into psychically integrated. Right. And that when we do that, there's this energy. The shadow contains energy. It's not negative. It's just parts of ourselves that live in exile. As Richard Schwartz says, no bad parts. And when it happens, when we kind of integrate, it's like, wow, there is, 5-year-old Matt. There is the critic. There is the part of me that feels like I don't have a right to be here. There's the king. There's the creative. There's the destroyer. All of those parts, when we integrate them, there's these realizations about where we've been, who we are, and where we're going. And that is a part of our presence. And a lot of our presence, you could actually sub out the word presence for power, right? Why did that person have that sense of power about them? And so spiritual realization is one, but also psychic. And these three questions are absolutely critical. And if you're thinking, as a leader, answering this question about who we are over and over, it's great to do with a partner. 5 minutes, answer the question or complete the sentence stem, who are you? And then the partner says, thank you, tell me who you are. Who are you? Keep repeating it. 5 minutes is a really long time. You can also do that as a journaling exercise, repeat it. It's like an onion layer, and you discover all these different layers of your identity that go into your values and your upbringing and your culture and your gender and your age and your role and what you do for a living and all of these different parts that, again, if you go to the spiritual core, you understand none of them are real, but they are all real in this form. And we really need to understand ourselves at that level around, who am I and what do I stand for in this life? And what's it going to be? What are my values that are going to form an integrity spine? And the thing about spiritual practice, you may have seen this post, is the realization into spirituality is really grounded by a core of values that gets bastardized as fundamentalism and moralism. And the reason that rules and precepts exist in different spiritual traditions is a way to kind of ground the transcendent realization in this life. And I actually think, and most of the early origins of spirituality would say, you must discover that yourself. So don't just read what the good book says, but you actually have to integrate that and self-realize who you are and what you stand for, given your connection to that. And then this understanding of where you are going in this life, you can say that is a sense of purpose. And that may just be a destination that you want to get to. But when we think of where you're going, we think of what it is that you stand for, the future that you are creating, the thing that you are put on this earth to do. And there may be many, but having a point of view around that creates a compelling person. And if you think of yourself when you're doing a project or you're in a role and you're deeply connected to that kind of sense of purpose, people follow that, right? Your limbic system is activated and that activates their limbic system and it creates influence. People will only follow you if you are compelled and engaged yourself in an understanding where you're going. Otherwise, why should they follow you? Why should anyone follow you if you don't have a point of view on that? And not only do you not have a point of view on that, having internalized that inside of you. And then that third question of with whom? Who are your people? Who is coming with you in that sense of relationship and tribe and community? and understanding where you fit in this earth, in this life. That has a quality of depth too. Our relationships define us as people, and who we relate to and who we affiliate with speaks to who we are. And they help us and they support us co-construct this life and add body and depth and hold us when we need to be held. And human beings are made to live in community and tribe. And so that adds a quality of depth and presence as well. So what I'd like you to do, again, we're not going to go too far into this, but I want you to let's just play around with this for a second. This is going to be like a minute, drop in. Okay, now you know that. You're going to like hear Matt in your head all week saying that. The surfing metaphor, I like them. And I want you to connect to just these questions, following your breathing, bringing your awareness inside, maybe a locus of your heart or your head. Hearing my voice say, "Who are you?" and noticing what blooms inside of you. I am. Maybe just take that a few more steps. Who are you? And just notice what arises in your body. Who are you? Who are you? Usually the answers get a little deeper, and just what I actually want you to do is anchor that and just kind of feel how that changes maybe your body a little bit. Probably a lot more layers. And where are you going? What's your purpose? So name that and internally give that words. And again, as you breathe into that purpose, that sense of where you're going, allow that to actually change your body. Sometimes I can feel myself leaning in when I'm connecting to that sense of purpose, or my shoulders move back a little bit. Where are you going? What is that compelling purpose in this life for you? Sometimes you can feel your cells enlivening. And then bringing your awareness to a circle of people around you, maybe large, maybe small. With whom? With whom are you going in this life? See those people maybe that support you, that love you, the relationships that sustain you. Maybe they're here, maybe they're gone. Maybe they're people that you have yet to meet, and you can still feel them and hold them. And I'd actually like you to feel behind you all of the people that have walked this earth before you. Maybe you can actually feel their hands on your back if that feels good to you. And feeling your ancestral lineage, that even through trauma and wounding, there are people that have survived and thrived for your right to be here as a human. Giving you body and grounding. Feeling the hands on your backs of all of those people stretching back a millennia that have lived their life so you could be here now. Breathe, wiggle your toes, fingers come on back. Knowing ourselves and integrating and going into these places is a part of what the integrative aspects of psychic integration is, what creates a sense of presence as well. Answering the questions that penetrate the heart of our lives and our leadership. Things maybe that, are on the road less traveled. Most humans, believe it or not, avoid questions like this and our salvation is in these answers. And when we find the answers, we cultivate a sense of depth and a sense of integration. And we become more whole. And what we know is, you've heard me talk about Warren Bennis's last book and talking about the crucible that leaders go through. That sense of fire that makes people. And as we do that, as layers get burned off, a more pure, whole, and complex version of ourselves is there. If we can contain ourselves through transition and liminal space, our psyche becomes more whole. And it rebuilds itself every single time we do that into a more individuated psychic whole. But we need help. And if you think of the hero's journey, you can't go on it without someone holding the mirror, knocking you over the head sometimes, loving you. And we can think of leaders that have done this, and we talked about a few of them last time. I talked about Marcus Aurelius, who was incredibly self-realized. One of the Stoics, right? We think of Stoic philosophers, again, coming back into vogue, that used his own realization of his own nature and human nature to lead the Roman Empire. I talked about Graciela Italiano Thomas, who escaped the Uruguayan resistance and had her own healing journey and her exploration of who she was at her deepest levels, transforming herself and moving to the United States and getting an education and having an impact at the highest levels of education and education policy. And through all of that, creating and stewarding myth and storytelling, both about herself and world stories, as a way to kind of understand herself and continually rebuild and evolve. And watching her tell those stories about how she would change and integrate and use those vehicles of depth to make her more complex and whole so she could give her gift on the biggest stages of education. Powerful people that are compelling people like Graciela, like Snake, have gone through their fire over and over and over. And what remains is beautiful. That alchemy that happens, that the strength from the broken bone that is rebuilt into something that is stronger and more whole. And what happens is we become more complex. And as I said, we move from instinctual or egocentric levels through outer lives all the way up to an understanding of holism, of how everything is related, able to take complex and paradoxical views of life, able to understand differing viewpoints and not have them threaten our own, how to balance individualism and revenue and quantitative empiricism and relational and emotional and ecological and structural. When we become more aware and when we do our own work, we move from a state that is really just more kind of primal in ourselves into an understanding of awakening into the planet and the universe. As Tony Robbins says, I'm going to cite Tony Robbins, it's not personal growth if it doesn't eventually end up serving someone else. And so as we grow and we do personal growth, we're working inside of ourselves, but the end result is that we're giving our gift somewhere. Okay. So we're rounding the bend here, and there is a level of somatic and body level awareness that we think of as well in presence. And so what I'd like you to actually do now is to just notice your posture for a second and notice how you're holding it. And maybe even just in the last few minutes as we've been talking since we did a meditation, notice your posture and notice how it's making you feel. Okay. And if I just said, take a breath and move your posture into that place of nobility or dignity or power or presence for you, just take a breath and just shift your body a little bit. For me, usually I kind of ground in my sit bones a little bit. I'm not rigid, and I'm kind of imagining my body here shifting. My shoulders are pulling back, and I'm now in a meeting, presenting something or listening to something. And in social psychology, there's the study of influence, of why some people have it and some people don't. And I, as a person that is built this way, will walk into rooms and look at people in a meeting by the way, when we used to go to meetings, it still happens sometimes. And I can immediately spot who's in charge, who's potentially influential, who's radiating power and not. And then the dynamics of the conversation unfailingly connect to that awareness purely by how people are holding themselves, because our bodies are actually incredible. They transmit our inner world. And so by doing, the spiritual level awareness and the psychic core and getting present, right, in our bodies, inside out, presence really is best inside out. It actually changes our bodies, and then people start to relate to us differently. I also think it's a form of a hack to go outside in as well. And so sometimes by shifting my body, I shift my state, and I just move my shoulders back a little bit. And it's like, I'm the one in charge of this meeting, right? Even if I'm not the one in charge of this meeting. And I can kind of just feel my regalness come online and my power come online. And it's so funny when I do that, how different people will relate to me. Human beings with our social receptors are always subtly patterning on the other person. How solid is this person? How confident are they? Where are they in terms of power? And how should I relate to them? Certainly don't want to weaponize that, but there is a clue there. And I can't tell you how many times we coach. It's probably up to 20% or so where I'm giving feedback to a leader actually about slumping in a meeting and what's happening in their body, or their level of distractedness of like looking away, or their head not being kind of on their shoulders, looking down, not maintaining eye contact. All of those things that kind of we can use for our body that are transmitting our presence as well. There's another thing that we talk about in public speaking, and this is the sense of deepening where we actually communicate from. And there's these three broad energy centers. We don't have time to go into them fully, but they loosely align with the chakras: the head, the heart, and the hara. The hara really is this kind of energy portal. Some spiritual traditions say it's like the kind of connection to the universe. Second and third chakras, if you're so inclined, it's kind of right below our belly button. And it really is, if you want to put your hand there, there's a huge bundle of nerves that exist there. And those, we're now kind of discovering and understanding in neuroscience that our kind of gut level of awareness relates to that nerve bundle that is actually there. If you want to go into the science angle of it, there's a spiritual principle there too, where we can kind of breathe down here and understand there's energy here into our heart, right? Maybe you just kind of do that for a second, just drop your, close your eyes and connect to your head. And when I do that, I can kind of like feel in my body, there's kind of this light head energy, and it's like stimulating and it's a little bright. This is where language fails, but I'm kind of connecting to my head. And then breathe, take a breath, and then connect to your heart. And then I can kind of feel there's another subtle kind of quality of now my energy is in that my heart space. It's a little warm. I can feel a little touched. It's different, right? There's a subtle energy difference in kind of then putting my focus and breathing in my heart space, and then take another breath and bring it all the way down into your hara, your gut. Actually feel that in my pelvis kind of becoming alive, energy radiating down kind of my legs. I can feel my feet on the ground. It's like the bottom half of the body comes online. You can just hear what happened to my voice, by the way. There's a clue there. It just dropped a note or two. Very interesting. Has its own subtle energy, the hara, or our gut. So put your hand on that and take a breath. Just kind of feel that for a second. There's a clue to presence here too, of speaking and living from that place. So shake it off. And now I want you to kind of come back into your head. I'm going to make you do something really awkward. Okay. I want you to give me a few sentences and speak into your computer. I want you to kind of focus on your head a little bit. Okay. About what you did this morning. Just say it. I went to blah, blah, blah. I woke up and ate, and just talk from here. Hopefully nobody was in the room with you. Okay. Hopefully you did that. All right. We're actually going to skip the heart. I want you to kind of, again, draw yourself back down. Take a big breath and draw yourself back down into your gut, into your hara. And I want you to now tell me again what you did this morning. So I don't know if that experiment worked, but what tends to happen, and we do kind of public speaking coaching with people, your voice actually drops. And by the way, when another human is feeling that and hears that, they're like, that person is in their hara, right? And like lower voice, more gravitas. It's my trick. And so you can kind of calibrate that. I encourage you the next time you're actually going to do public speaking to kind of breathe down into your hara and focus on actually speaking from your gut, because most of the time we're just kind of like up here. And you're going to start getting some like crazy feedback from people. They're like, you really have a depth to you. You're like a Yoda kind of person. Maybe you're not even saying something that clever, but it's because of that. So play around with that a little bit and just understand, right? And then you're kind of connecting that to voice and body and posture. At Strozzi, by the way, a related kind of, it's good to do the length, width, and depth meditation for those of you that know that one as well. I'm not going to do that because it's pretty well known, especially in the evolution community, but that's another kind of great example of how you can kind of use that as a way to kind of get yourself into that base position, but speak from your core. Put that on a t-shirt. All right. So the last here is just another quick story. Gina Randolph was the only SVP of operations at DaVita, former dialysis nurse. I'm not sure if she went to college. I mean, she certainly went to nursing school, but back in the day, nurse, certain levels of nursing, you don't need a BA. She was an amazing human, is an amazing human. And because she was one of the 5 most powerful people in the company, the other 4 were men, of course, being a female, she had to actively deconstruct what executive presence was. And she used to actually teach a course on this. And I have these slides from 2008, and they are amazing. And it is absolutely outside in. And because she had to work extra hard, right, because of the gender dynamics that show up naturally in the workplace still, she started to just discover this sense and really found that executive presence is just that kind of executive functioning that we radiate wherever. And she talked about how successful people are constantly aware of how they're being perceived, not because they're manipulating or trying to be have a persona projection, but they're adjusting their really inner state and then how it shows up in actions to really control their effect magnetically, right? And that's a part of social sensitivity, is understanding kind of that effect in other people. Here's a bunch of her other lists. I didn't put up all the slides, but it's just fascinating when she actually started deconstructing what it means to have executive presence. I love the one that says, occasionally and purposely nod rather than incessantly bob your head. The eye contact. She talked about disciplining off stage and praising on. She had a bunch in there about management and leadership basics. But some of these I just think are just really important things. And there's a lot of conversations, I'd say that 20%, again, that 20%, where it just happened to me a few months ago. I had a conversation with an SVP about what they were going to wear. And they were talking about, I probably should stop wearing t-shirts. They're not a kind of a formal shop by any means, but how they were dressing was not a metaphor, right, brand wise, and what they were communicating to the depth and height of their position. And so that too, and thinking about how we're putting ourselves together, and then all of kind of our subtle body language, and the shadow side of executive presence is the guy in a suit that's speaking like a disembodied corporate robot. And the reason that persona exists, that's a inauthentic version of executive presence. We don't need like Wall Street guy in a suit at all, right? That is not the point. Presence is about the deepest forms of authenticity. And as that comes out, there's a sense of polish, of thoughtfulness, of connection, of integration that happens, that people look at and they're like, that person has it together. And so, you can do that in a t-shirt. So thanks to Gina. And there's some books on creating positive presence if you really want to go down this very tactical line. And so we are going to close. Again, I'm not going to talk about vocational, but building a craft over a lifetime of mastery. Generally about 10 years in, I think about myself as a coach, I just start to know what I'm talking about. And people listen to that. And that allows me to relax and get into my body. That allows me to be creative. And that allows me, when I speak, to say things that people relate to. And my credibility then, and which becomes an aura, stays in the room when I'm not there and is in the room when I'm not there. And so building vocational presence means learning about what we're doing, and mastery also equals presence. Okay, so that is it. If you would like any final words of checking out, I would love to just hear how you're leaving this session. Thanks for hanging, talking about presence. If you have any questions, I'll stay on for another minute or two. You can put them in chat, and just really appreciate your time. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day in exploration, do something good for yourself, and a great weekend. Thanks. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, Matt, there's one question in there before we close.
Yes, thank you. Good way to get in touch with, integrate our shadow dark parts. Check out Big Mind. It's a book, and you might even be able to find the full meditation on YouTube. Genpo Roshi, where he does a meditation, integrates all our subselves, conversations with them, that brings them in. Grab a coach. So Matt, if you're able to, there's a good handful of folks at Evolution that can help you in dialogue and coaching, talk about your shadow and your subselves. Find a therapist that does internal family systems, that does parts work. They can also do it. There is a branded version of shadow work. Shadow work, I think, is much bigger than just the branded version. But if you look up shadow work, Cliff Berry's community, those practitioners as coaches and workshops can also help you find it. And there's a great book called Meeting the Shadow that you can also use to understand it. But a therapist or a coach that does parts work can be really helpful. Otherwise, shadow work, Big Mind, voice dialogue practitioners, internal family systems are great. So, all right, hopefully that's helpful. Thank you. Welcome.